Good morning, board members. At this time, we will see if we have a quorum, and I'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Burns,
Here.
Mr. Cordero,
Here, sir. Good morning.
good morning, Mr. Springer,
Yes, sir. I'm here. This is Brent.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, then we do have a quorum for the meeting, and we have a motion. You've had opportunity to see the agenda as been presented. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. Verdar makes the motion.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Beth Burns.
Okay, we have a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Burns,
Yes.
Mr. Cordero,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Springer,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Okay, at this time then, the agenda has been approved. I'm going to ask our assistant superintendent to begin the presentation so that way we can go through what line items that need to be addressed today. Mr. Taylor, if I'm going to turn it over to you at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Kevin Taylor, Assistant Superintendent. Thank you, Board, for your time today. This was just to go through kind of a brief slideshow of recommendations, recommended additions, and some clarifying items that we need to probably address with all three policies at once. So for 3210, just so you know, staff went back through this in preparation for the meeting to make sure that everything was put together in a way that, gave the board the best option to approve. So some of the recommendations that that staff would make to this would be a time frame for which the same material can be objected to at the school level and at the district level. For example, a year. So if a book is challenged and it is determined to be, okay to stay, then when can that book be challenged again? So that's one area that we felt like needed to be included in the policy. Also a method for parents to object to the decision made by the school review committee or the Board of Education decision made after their review. If it were, even if it simply states that the parent can request a hearing with the Board of Education or submit something in writing. So in that particular case, if it were to go through the steps in the policy, if the board decided to either pull or leave the book, if there was a challenge to that, there's nothing in here that really states how that would take place. And then thirdly, for 3210, as far as additions go, a method by which a book that has been removed from the circulation be reinstated by request. So in other words, a book that was pulled in 2023 and it's now 2025, is that book always going to be pulled, or is there a method by which the book can be reinstated, as another recommendation. For 3210 and 3210R, we noticed a couple of possible discrepancies in here. So when you look at 3210, it states that books and other instructional materials may be removed from the school media collection for legitimate educational reasons and subject to the limitations of the First Amendment. Before any material is removed, the committee shall ensure that the curriculum is aligned to the Common Core state standards and articulated from grade level to grade level. And then 32R says when materials are subject to an objection, they shall be removed with the ability to access, and this is paraphrasing the quote a little bit, ability to access materials with parent permission, and that the parent would need to check out their student at the time the materials are checked out. I don't know if this, and Brandon, you may want to ring in on this, Mr. McPherson. When we looked at this based on the presentation that was given by you for training purposes, we thought about the Counts versus Cedarville School District and how that may impose, or if it would impose, a stigma or burden on access to that book if it was placed behind the counter. I don't know if you can speak to that now, Mr. McPherson, but just something we put in there to make sure we were giving the board everything they needed to make a decision.
I think that is something to consider. I think intermediate steps or preliminary steps while something's under review, I don't have as much concern about or raising any sort of stigma or burden while it's under review. I think because that's a period of time where your process or your procedure sort of wins the day, as long as you comply with it as written, I'm not as concerned about that as far as unilaterally pulling something off a shelf versus, okay, this is, in process, therefore we're going to put it behind a shelf and allow it to be checked out with parental permission. So I have less qualms or concerns about it given the state of the law in North Carolina.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. The next slide is a schematic that shows, and it's probably going to be hard to see if you're looking at it on your phone, and maybe even hard to see if you're looking at it on your computer because it's so small. But this is the current policy of 3210, and it goes through the point of challenge, where that goes through the CMAC or the school level committee, where it goes to CMAC and eventually to the board. Very linear process in that process. The proposed analysis, and this is a task analysis of the proposed policy of 3210. So you still have that linear process down the middle, but with multiple schools coming apart in the sides, you show the amount of work that will be put into a challenge such as this based on the proposed changes to policy 3210. We also included a couple of scenarios, slide number 6, and I won't read everything to you, but essentially middle school A challenges this book or a book. There's a potential to purchase additional titles of the book. For example, Title A, or excuse me, School A feels the book should be removed. Parent is unhappy with the school only removing it from their library and not removing it from the district, so the parent then requests that it be moved from all district schools. The CMAC meets. The CMAC provides recommendation to the BOE to remove all those materials from all schools, and the Board of Education decides to remove the title at all schools, and the parent is happy with the decision. So that's one scenario possibly. On page 7, you see another scenario whereby School A challenges the book. The book has been reviewed at 5 additional schools. The potential need to purchase all those books again. Let's say middle school A feels the book should be removed along with middle schools B, C, D, and E, but school F feels the book should stay. The parent is happy with school A's decision. CMAC meets regardless of the parent's satisfaction with the school level decision. CMAC now provides recommendation to the Board of Ed to keep the title. Board of Education decides to keep the title at all schools, whereby nullifying the original request to remove the book from School A. Page 8, 3210R recommendations. Also, we added in core instructional materials were not to be included in the challenges. We would recommend that that be added into 3210R. We would also recommend referencing 3200 in 3210R as it's referenced in 3210. Some resources available through the internet and used in individual classes to provide up-to-date information or information on current events may not be available for advanced review. This was removed from 3210 in one of the iterations in board committee or policy committee. If we add it back into both, I guess would be the recommendation. The notification sections and timeline built into the enrollment process. So the notifications and timeline that we currently have in place are built into the current enrollment software that we utilize. So if they want to notify that they would like to do that, they can certainly do that with the sections that we have. Section C adds in acts of reprisal and retribution regarding committee members. We would recommend that that also be extended to staff if a book is challenged and is not overturned, or if the committee at the school level decides to keep the book, for example. Some possible discrepancies that we noticed. 3210 requires that requested materials for review are available within 10 business days, while 3210R requires that the materials be available within 20 days. I believe the 20 days is what needs to be put in there based on the conversations that we've had. I just wanted to make sure we clean that up before voting on it. When materials are subject to an objection, they shall be removed from the general circulation and held in the custody of the school, library, media coordinator at the respective school where material was subject to an objection. We've already kind of gotten through this component with Mr. McPherson's help, so I think we can skip over that part. In the interim time frame, while the objection is being adjudicated, students shall retain the ability to access materials subject to the objection of the obtaining parental permission. So again, that was addressed by Mr. McPherson. When a student, this is part of 3210R, when a student accesses materials subject to an objection with parental permission, the parent shall be responsible for checking out their student at the time that the materials that are subject to objection are checked out. Further, the parent shall transport the student and materials home via privately owned vehicle. Recommendation of the staff would be that that not be the case. Rolls and documents produced by the committee reads as if each member must tally their vote, not anonymous, so that the secretary of that committee may report this information to the superintendent, and this will be used to submit to the Board of Education upon additional level of appeal, whereby, so each individual's vote would be tallied by name. Suggested additions to 3200 clearly distinguish primary core materials as the curriculum foundation and supplementary materials as enhancers. Another recommendation for 3200 would be to define criteria for both primary and supplementary materials, ensuring alignment with standards and adaptability to diverse learning styles. And finally, 3200, establish a committee for primary material akin to existing Media and Technology Advisory Committee, MTAC, for supplementary materials. And that concludes the presentation component. Be happy to answer or take any questions or recommendations from the board.
Okay, board members, we'll open it up for any questions, comments.
I'm going to be asking mine one at a time as they're voted on, is what I'm going to do. So,
Well, this is Beth Burns. Quite honestly, especially even after that presentation, I haven't seen where this revision improves the process of the original policy 3210. It's just my opinion, but I think that it's another level of governance that just isn't needed. And at the end of both the existing and the proposed revision, the Board of Education makes the final decision on whether a book is pulled from a shelf or not. This is also going to put a lot of additional work on our staff, and at this time, I don't think that's wise.
this is Mr. Cordero. I have a quick question. So in your examples, you had stated that there would need to be additional books purchased. Can you explain why that is?
If the book is going to be reviewed in a timely manner, then we'll need to have extra copies of that book, either through online versions or whichever. Obviously, we would try to go with free first, if they're not available. So we could do this in a timely manner. We may have to purchase those books.
Are we currently doing that? Is that the current practice?
Yes, according to Mr. Lawson, yes.
Okay, so for example, for this, the list of 40, Mr. Lawson, you're saying that for the list of 40, we purchased additional books in order to review those in a timely manner. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, this is Craig Lawson. Could you restate, sir?
Yes, sir. So I'm trying to determine at what point we need to purchase these books. And I think I heard that we are already doing that. So that makes me think that for this list of 40 books, for example, that the Board of Education gave to staff back in January, February timeframe, did we purchase additional books to review those titles in a timely manner?
Yes, sir. So let me clarify. One is we're speaking right now about if there's an objection according to 3210, and under that objection process, the requirement is for a school review committee and or the MTAC committee for all members to read the book in its entirety. And in order to do that, we would need to make sure to do that in a timely manner that each member of that team had a copy of that book. So we're trying to just show what that would take resource-wise under the current policy compared to the changes to the policy, how that might affect us having a need for additional resources. Currently, we've only had Scythe challenged, and then also we have 3 books currently being challenged at Pender. The books being challenged at Pender are core instructional materials under Wit and Wisdom. Because of that, we have enough copies for all of the team members to utilize. So we haven't had to go out and buy books yet, but that would be the steps that we would take if that occurred. The reviews that occurred last year were done under 3200 prior to any changes or updates. That review is different than an objection review. It's a review for reading, so the committee handles that slightly differently than if there's an objection. Does that answer your question, sir?
I'm not sure. So you gave me a lot of information that did not pertain to my question. So my question is, did we buy books for this list of 40? It's a yes or no question.
No, sir, we did not.
Okay. And so why would that change?
It would change depending upon whether we were getting an objection from a parent to review under policy 3210, in which we would want every member of the team to read the book. And if we didn't have enough books, then that would be the steps we would take to ensure that we secured them.
But why couldn't the members of the book review committee just pass that book around and read it sequentially instead of simultaneously?
They certainly could, sir, if we were willing to delay the response to the parent.
Yeah, I mean, given that 3210R requires the book to be put behind the shelf for the librarian, so, and the kids are still able to access it with parental permission, I don't see any need for the rush. I just don't understand why staff would want to buy more books when we don't have to. That's where I'm confused here. Can you explain that to me?
I think the concern is with, Senate Bill 49, one of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is informing parents in a timely manner of requests. And you notice we changed and made some adjustments to if a parent requests, for example, the revisions to 3210 states 10 days in order to comply with the parent's request to review instructional material. 3210R says 20 days. That was something that came up in the presentation. But I think that, in the situation where a parent is objecting, we want to try to hold to the spirit of the Senate bill and trying to get that answer back to the parent as quickly as possible. Certainly, for example, in the case with Pender Lee right now, they currently are looking at Woods Runner. They expect to have a decision on that on the 28th. That certainly would not have been possible if we had only one copy of that book. So whereas now it's taking them, 2 to 3 weeks to review that, you're looking at, 2 to 3 weeks per person on that committee to read it. You got 12 members of that committee. That's an awfully long time before we could get an answer back to that parent.
But my question is, why do we need to buy the books? I mean, if we're concerned about resources, it seems like the staff is trying to waste money by buying these additional books when we can just pass the book around. I mean, as soon as possible to means whatever is reasonable. And if we only have one copy, then we only have one copy. So we're still abiding by the spirit of the policy if we just pass the book around, and, as long as it takes, especially considering the fact that the book has not been pulled from the shelf, or it's not removed from the library, so kids can still read it. So I don't understand why staff is recommending that we buy all these books. I'm still a little bit confused over that.
Well,
I understand the.
Yes, sir. And I don't think that we're necessarily recommending. What we're trying to do is basically show you the potential need there for us to do it, and to kind of give you some real world potential examples of how things would occur with the current policy and the proposed policy. Again, under the proposed policy, if something was challenged at elementary school, instead of passing that one book around to 12 members, now we have 9 schools reviewing it. So, again, that's going to further extend out the time in which we can provide a response. And again, I think our goal today is just to give you all, as board members, the information so that you can feel that you are informed to make your decision. Certainly, how we follow that process is part of what's being proposed to be outlined in 3210R. That's where it defines how those steps occur in that process. So certainly, if you did not want us to buy additional books, or if the board was, so chose for us to pass those books around and extend that process out, regardless of timeline, we would certainly follow that process.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be clear that the under the current policy and under the proposed policy, it's not required that the school system buy any more books.
No.
Right?
Yes, sir. No, sir, it's not currently required.
The potential is there.
No, also under the proposed policy, it is also not required that we have to, because staff, I think, painted a picture for the board members that we're going to need to buy additional books, and that was part of staff's analysis.
Yeah.
But that's not required. So now maybe staff chooses that it wants to do that, but what I want to be clear about to my colleagues on the board is, under the proposed policy changes, it's not required that we buy any more books.
Right.
That's correct, right?
Yes,
No,
sir, that
the potential is there.
This is Beth
Perhaps need
Burns. It
Okay,
might
so
not be
you're not answering
required.
my question. My question is does the proposed policy require that we buy more books? It's a binary answer, yes or no.
No.
Thank you very much. The proposed policy does not require that we buy more books. That's all I wanted to highlight here. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is Beth Burns. I had one thing to add on to that. I think, as Mr. Lawson was trying to say earlier, if you want to get these book reviews done in a timely manner, you're going to have to be able to provide the books for all of the staff, all of the committees, all the members of the committees to read. I mean, how long is too long to ask parents to wait for an answer?
So, Ms. Burns, to address that, I'd say I'd rather get this right and not overburden staff than rush it. And so the purpose of purchasing books and making all the staff members on the committee review it simultaneously, to me, puts an undue burden on staff. And so I don't think that in order to meet the spirit of as soon as possible, that we have to force everyone to drop everything they're doing immediately and make them read the book. I think that they can read it, work that into their normal work. Obviously, they have other work they're doing, they're teachers, and they do lots of other things. So I just don't understand why we would want to force teachers to do something sooner and rather than later, as long as we get the right decision in the end. If that makes sense. So I wouldn't want to force teachers to all have to read it at one time. And the policy certainly does not require that.
Board members, is there any other questions, comments?
I don't have anything.
I do have a question. Mr. Taylor, you had said in the presentation that if a book was behind the counter that was being checked out, I just wanted for clarification to make sure I did hear this correctly, that it would require, if the student checked it out, not only the parent's permission, but it would also require, after checking that out, for the parent to check the student out of school that day as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's the way we're interpreting that. It's in 3210R.
Mr. Smith, this is Mr. Cordero. That was, I think, a recommendation by Mr. Springer. Mr. Springer, please interrupt me if I'm saying anything that's wrong. But I think the idea there was, if the book's been challenged, it's likely because the material was inappropriate, and so if the effort to check the student out when the book was checked out, at the end of the school day, was just to ensure that that book is not kind of passed around in the halls and/or in the classroom on the day of checkout. So that way, basically the book goes home, and then, from that point until the student brings it back in, that book's at home, and it's not, again, being passed around in the halls and things of that nature. Is that kind of what you were getting at, Mr. Springer, with that recommendation?
Yes, sir, but additionally, what I would say is, we have a hard enough time with discipline on the buses as we currently know it today, or within the past few weeks, and I don't think passing the book around that shouldn't have even been in the school to begin with would be permissible. Then the bus driver's already busy trying to drive and mitigate traffic, let alone have to worry about a kid back there trying to show another kid some obscenity or whatever, taking the verbiage out of context, however it is. So that was the point of that.
So just to be clear, what you're saying the verbiage was, I just want to make sure is that, so you're saying that if a book's checked out, they have to wait to the end of the day before they receive the book, and then are they to be escorted to the office with that book till the parent comes? So in between the office and the media center, there's no passing around of the book? Is that, I'm just trying to wrap my head around all of this.
Are you referring that to me, Mr. Chair?
Well, to anyone that might possibly have an answer to that question.
Yeah. So what I would say, Mr. Chair, is if we're going to remove the book from the shelf and it's going to remain in the custody of the librarian, what would be the difference in leaving it on the shelf and having kids just walk around showing the book to everybody? That's what I was trying to get rid of. If the parents have signed a permission slip stating that child can get that book, that doesn't say every child in the whole school has access to that book, or her or his friends can have access to that book. Because they might be opposing they might have opposing differences the parents might, and their child may not want to be subjected to that. So to alleviate that, objectionable confrontation, it would pretty much take that out of the equation.
Any other questions, comments, board members?
And Mr. Smith, I just a quick feedback. I agree with Mr. Springer. I mean, I would leave it up to staff, but I think, essentially the librarian could probably just leave the book in the office, and then, when the child's picked up at the end of the day, they just hand over the book to the parent. To me, that, seems reasonable. But again, I would leave it up to staff. If staff wanted to do something else, then that's fine with me.
So how do we address it again if a child is riding on the school bus? Because, I mean, if someone doesn't have transportation, does the book stay in the office until a parent comes and gets the book?
I think that
Is that what the recommendation is?
Yes. Let me know if you disagree, Mr. Springer.
What are the thoughts from staff? I know they objected to it, but I would be willing to entertain and listen to the reasons behind it.
So just so that I know, for revision purposes and any motions that may come up, for, approved with a revision, this would be a revision to section D of 3210R, number 3.
I think it's page 10 on the PowerPoint, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, sir, it is. Thank you. So it currently says, when a student accesses material subject to an objection with parental permission, the parent shall be responsible for checking out their student at the time the materials that are subject to objection be checked out. So we would probably strike that and enter into something that would say the book may be checked out, left in the media center, or left in the office for the child to take home. What about driving? What about riding the bus? I just want to make sure I get it right, you guys.
Well, I think that's what we're asking staff to opine on, because Mr. Smith is basically, the theoretical here, as I understand Mr. Smith, who had proposed it, is that the child's a bus rider. And so essentially we're waiting until the parent can come to pick up the book to ensure it doesn't get passed around on the bus.
I'm just asking. I'm not proposing any of that. By no means. I don't want the public to think that, I'm adding all this extra red tape. No, I'm just asking the question, like I said, what is procedure going to be followed on that if this book is in that sense being treated in this manner? I just want to make clarification before we vote on anything.
This is Brad. If you're asking staff's opinion on it, can you hear me okay? Can you all hear me okay? This is Brad.
Yes, sir. You're fine. Go ahead, Dr. Breelove.
If you're asking for staff's opinion on it, I do think that it would limit all students' access to a book. Many of our students do not have transportation, and so if the board chooses to go this route, I do think that we would have to work out something for that student to get home with the book, if this is the direction that the board chooses to go. In my opinion, I believe that, it would limit a book's access for many students that don't have an alternative way to get home. So, it would create some additional work, and certainly we will do whatever the board decides to do, but it would be challenging.
So a recommendation that I might have is you can just give the book to the bus driver. It seems pretty simple to me to say, hey, bus driver so-and-so, little Johnny Smith is going to take this book when he gets off the bus, just hand it to the bus driver, and then the bus driver can hand it to little Johnny on his way out. seems pretty reasonable and easy to me. I don't know if anybody would object to that.
Board members, is any of the comments or questions concerning this?
I don't have anything.
Nothing here, sir, from Mr. Cordero.
Ms. Burns, do you have anything else before we have entertain any kind of motion on the floor?
No, sir, nothing else.
Okay. Staff, do you have anything else before I open the floor up for a motion?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there any motion on the floor then concerning Mr. Taylor? Do you want to give the policy number, revision number, what we're actually voting on at this time, since there's been some discussion based on what we've already, have talked about and some of the changes? You want to just give us that policy again before we take the vote?
I believe it's Mr. Smith. I believe it's 3210 is the first one on the agenda. Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that. Is there a motion on the floor at this time?
Mr. Guerrero, make a motion to approve the policy as proposed in the agenda packet.
I'll second.
Is there? Okay, Mr. Cordero has made the motion. Mr. Springer has seconded the motion. At this time, we'll do the roll call vote.
10 versus 20.
Mr. Cordero?
Yes.
Mr. Springer?
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Barnes?
No.
Mr. Hall?
I think he's had a family emergency, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, Mr. Hall is not on the line, then is my assumption based on, okay. I believe you're correct, Mr. Springer. There is, the call has been dropped. So the vote is, Mr. McPherson, since Mr. Hall is no longer on the call, it's 2-1. The board chair votes to tie a vote or to break a vote. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. You can make a tie or break a tie.
Okay, well, the motion then dies. Okay, Mr. Taylor, then go ahead.
The next one would be to consider policy revisions to 3200.
Okay, do you have comments on that, Mr. Taylor?
No, sir.
Board members, do you have any comments or questions based on what you've already received?
I don't have anything further, Mr. Chair.
And nothing here from Mr. Cordero.
Ms. Burns,
Beth Burns, no, nothing here, sir.
is there any emotions on the floor for this?
And Mr. Cordero will make a motion to approve the policy as recommended in the agenda packet.
I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Cordero. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
need to interrupt for just a second. I just did an additional review of policy 2342, and it states that the chairperson can vote only to break a tie, not to make a tie, Mr. Chair.
Well, then we've already broken that policy in the past then, Mr. McPherson.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to.
I'll say that I'm very disappointed in that statement, but since we've already allowed the chair to break make a tie or break a tie in the past. So now where the chair does not get to vote to make a tie.
He does not get to make a tie according
Okay.
30.
Well, then do we need to
32.
go back and does the first then, since my vote has been canceled out, is there going to be a need for a revote? Or is it automatically then that the vote passed based on the 2-to-1 vote?
The vote passes based on a 2-to-1 vote.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. McPherson. In the future, if we can make sure that we have all of this ready to go before an actual meeting is
Yes,
taking
sir.
place, so that our legal advice and because this is now something that has hit us, that we want to make sure we're doing everything above board and keeping things legal and not bringing embarrassment to the board when a vote is made. So we've got a motion on the floor and a second, and this time we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Barnes,
No.
Mr. Cordero,
Yes.
Mr. Springer,
Yes.
Mr. Hall, are you on the call at this time? Okay, at this time then the motion carries 2-to-1. The chair does not vote. Is there other items that need to be presented, Mr. Taylor?
Consideration of second read policy, RMP, 3210R.
Is there any comments or questions, board members, concerning that particular policy before we take a vote or a motion on that? Not hearing any, is there a motion then for that particular policy?
Mr. Cordero makes a motion to approve the policy as it appears in the agenda packet.
Have a motion by Mr. Cordero. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Springer. At this time, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Springer?
Yes.
Mr. Cordero?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Burns?
No.
This time, the motion, based on 2-to-1, the motion carries. Mr. Taylor, is there any other action items that we need to be looking at today?
No, sir.
Mr. Smith, this is Mr. McPherson again.
Yes?
We have inconsistencies between two policies that I want to point out right now. So duties of officers under 2210 provides that the chairperson will vote only to make or break a tie and will serve as the spokesperson for the board in communication of the board's position. That is inconsistent with the voting methods policy. So I don't want to point out the source of my confusion, but that is the confusion at this juncture, Mr. Chair, is that you do have the ability to make a tie under the duties of officers. So I apologize, but we have this inconsistency between policy 2003-402 voting methods and duties of officers 2210. So, based on policy, you do have the ability to make a tie. I revert back to my original opinion. I apologize, but there's been inconsistencies between those two policies that needs to be corrected.
Mr. McPherson, this is Mr. Cordero. So in the event that there's two policies that conflict with each other, how does the board, or legally, what should we do to decide which one controls?
Well, one grants the ability to break a tie. One grants to the ability to make and break a tie. So they're not. The inconsistency is that one lists the ability to make a tie, and when you have a policy that grants an additional right, it just isn't referenced in the other policy. So it's that there are two policies that speak to the same obligation. So in the event of conflict, you give the additional right is also present. So the ability to make or break a tie is present in the policy. So, Mr. Smith, you were correct in your original statement and analysis under 2210. duties of officers. And I apologize for the confusion, sir. I was looking at the voting methods policy, not the duties of officers policy.
So for clarification, every vote that we just took then, the first vote would remain a tie, or do we need to go back and revisit every one of these? I mean, this needs to be above board.
Yes, sir. My opinion would be that the cleanest way to address this now that we have addressed what the rules of the game are under your policies is that I would recommend revoting on the 3 motions again. That way it's super clear to the public what the final outcome is.
All right, board members.
Mr. Chair, consider policy revisions 3210 was the first one, if you need me to let you know which one it was.
I don't need, at this time, the first, then we go back then to 3210, you said policy revisions. Is there any other comments, questions before we take this vote? Is Mr. Hall back on the line yet? Staff?
It does not appear that way.
All right, is there a motion then for this particular policy?
Mr. Smith, this is Mr. Cordero. I think given the conflict between policy and then also given that one of our board members appears to have been appears to have needed to drop off the call because of a family emergency, I think I'd like to motion to recess this meeting until the next regularly scheduled meeting so we can decide.
We have a motion on the
Yes,
we have a motion on the floor to recess this meeting to the next regular scheduled meeting to add this to the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion?
But we could all say a prayer for Mr. Hall's father. I think his father is the reason why he's unable to join us. So our prayers are with him, or mine are, absolutely.
Roll call vote for the recess into the next meeting. Mr. Springer?
Yes.
Mr. Cordero?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Burns?
No.
And the motion dies. Recess is denied. Is there a motion on the floor then for policy first that was presented?
Yes, sir. Mr. Cordero will make a motion to approve policy 3210 as recommended.
I have a motion to approve the policy as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second. Roll call vote. Ms. Burns?
No.
Mr. Springer?
Yes.
Mr. Cordero?
Yes, sir.
Motion dies. Is there another vote, presentation on number 2?
Yes, sir. Mr. Cordero will make a motion to approve of, are we on 3200?
3200, yes, sir.
Okay, 3200. Make a motion to approve 3200 as it appears in the board packet.
Have a motion to approve 3200 as presented in the board packet. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. Springer?
Yes.
Mr. Cordero?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Burns?
No.
Motion dies. Third item.
And Mr. Cordero will make a motion to approve 3210R as appears in the agenda packet.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Roll call vote. Mr. Springer?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
No.
Mr. Cordero?
Yes, sir.
Motion dies. Is there any other action items to be presented?
No, sir.
Can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I make a
To adjourn the meeting.
I have a motion by Mr. Springer, second by Ms. Burns. Roll call vote. Ms. Burns?
yes.
Ms. Cudero?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Springer?
Yes.
At this time, we consider the meeting